a relatively quiet NBA offseason so far and compared to years past, but some of the biggest news of this NBA offseason has came when superstar forward Kevin Durant has requested a trade from the Brooklyn Nets, and there's been a lot of talks and speculations about what teams Kevin Durant can go play for, even with 4 more years remaining on his contract. We saw the list came out with the Miami Heat and the Phoenix Suns being at the top of that list, but now the Boston Celtics have emerged as a team in order to acquire Kevin Durant, and it sent the NBA world on fire when that news came out that the Boston Celtics had offered up Jaylen Brown in a package to acquire Kevin Durant. The Brooklyn Nets have right now turned it down, but I'm sure that there's still talks going on behind the scenes, so it brings up the question today: should the Boston Celtics trade Jaylen Brown in order to acquire Kevin Durant? I'm going to be talking about that today. I'm going to be talking about both sides of this. If you're the Brooklyn Nets, and if you're the Brooklyn Nets fans, and if you're the Boston Celtics and you're Boston Celtics fans, how would I approach this situation? And I think that this is a super intriguing topic, so I've got to talk about it here today. So let's get into it. So the first side I'm going to talk about is with the Brooklyn Nets organization, and if you're a Brooklyn Nets fan. Now, obviously, no matter who you get in return, whether it's Jaylen Brown, you're getting a package from the Boston Celtics, or you're getting a package from the Minnesota Timberwolves or the Golden State Warriors, or any team that can offer up a package to the Brooklyn Nets, you're not going to be able to get a guy who's going to be able to replace Kevin Durant. I think that's pretty common knowledge. Unless you traded Kevin Durant straight up for a guy like LeBron James, you're not going to get someone who has the talent level and the superstar capabilities like a Kevin Durant does. But at the end of the day, if you're able to acquire assets and you're able to acquire good young talent, that is still going to be something that the Brooklyn Nets would be incentivized to get, especially with a guy like Jaylen Brown. Now, if I'm the Brooklyn Nets front office, because Kevin Durant has came out and requested a trade, you have a distressed asset, which means his value is going to be a little bit lower, even though the ceiling is very high for a superstar and a top 5 player at the bare minimum with a guy like Kevin Durant. Now, the Brooklyn Nets, they're in a tricky position because they came into last season as the betting odds-on favorite to go and win the Eastern Conference and to go and win the NBA Finals, but this team couldn't even win a playoff game. If you want to, accumulate some of that to Kyrie Irving not getting vaccinated, regardless of your personal beliefs or not, if you want to, accumulate some of that to James Harden forcing his way out in order to get himself to Philadelphia, that makes a lot of sense as well too. This team psychologically was clearly not there, but Kevin Durant, he did struggle in the playoffs versus the Boston Celtics. They were the only team in the playoffs to get swept, and Kevin Durant still played at, maybe not a KD level, but still at an all-star level, averaging 26.3 points per game, 6.3 assists, 5.8 rebounds in those 4 games versus the Boston Celtics, even though they played terrific defense on KD. So when you look at it from a fan perspective and you look at it from the front office perspective, yeah, you don't want to give up KD. He's got 4 more years left up on your contract, but you have a distressed asset. He clearly doesn't want to be there. And from the way it looks with the team as it's currently constructed right now, you're not going to be able to go and compete just because of the fact that you did get swept in the playoffs last year. And Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant, while they maybe not have a perfect relationship, it doesn't look like they've mended really anything since what's gone on last season. It looks like that relationship has kind of fizzled out regardless of what you want to say. And Kevin Durant clearly just does not want to be there. So of course you want to get up off of him. So if I'm the fans and if I'm the front office of the Brooklyn Nets, I'm doing everything in my willpower in order to get rid of Kevin Durant, in order to make him happy, be able to get some kind of compensation in return. And at the end of the day, it clearly didn't work out. You have one postseason win, no matter how you want to slice it up, and the Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant era, no matter what. So that's just my perspective on it if I was the Brooklyn fans and if I was the Brooklyn organization. Now let's move on to the Boston side of it, because this is where it gets tricky. If you're the Boston organization and you're the Boston fan base, I think that this is a 50-50 split. I've seen all over Boston Celtics Instagram pages and Twitter, half of the fans on Boston side are, hey, we love Jaylen Brown. He's a homegrown guy. He's really helped us take our game to the next level, and he's helped us reach the NBA Finals. But at the end of the day, he's not Kevin Durant. And I think a lot of Boston's fans and a lot of NBA fans obviously understand that. Jaylen Brown's a great guy. He's a great young commodity, a great young two-way player who still has a light years of great basketball ahead of him, but he's never going to be Kevin Durant. That is an all-time transcendent superstar level player. But the other side of Boston fans are saying, hey, we were 2 wins away from winning the NBA Finals. Why not keep this young core intact and keep these guys together who clearly have chemistry and a relationship together? Ime Udoka was a big reason as to why this team was able to flip the script, have a defensive identity, and you saw through a lot of the postseason, Jaylen Brown was the best player on the Boston Celtics. We clearly know Jaylen Brown is not a number one, but he was sure as hell playing like a number one, not only in the Brooklyn Nets series when Jaylen Brown was averaging 22.5 points per game, 5.3 rebounds, and 4 assists a game in those 4 games versus the Brooklyn Nets, but not only that, he did it in the finals as well, and he was clearly outshining Jason Tatum in those 2022 NBA Finals versus the Golden State Warriors. Jaylen Brown averaged 23.5 points per game, 7.3 rebounds, and 3.7 assists per game. He looked like the guy that was going to be the closer for the Boston Celtics moving forward, and Jason Tatum was not rising to the occasion. Clearly, time in and time out, Jaylen Brown had his struggles, but at the end of the day, though, Jaylen Brown clearly was showing an ability to take his team to the next level. So I understand the other Boston Celtics fan side of it that, hey, we have this young core. We have this guy who's got a lot of great basketball ahead of him. Plus, he's a homegrown guy. We were also 2 wins away from winning the NBA Finals. Why should we get rid of a guy like Jaylen Brown in order to acquire a guy like Kevin Durant, who is under contract for the next 4 years? And while he is a better player than Jaylen Brown, we'd be giving up a lot of assets, a lot of depth. On top of the fact is, we don't know if Kevin Durant's going to want to be here in 2 to 3 years, even though he's under contract. And he only has 1 playoff series win with his tenure in the Brooklyn Nets, no matter how you want to slice it up. So Kevin Durant obviously is ready just to move on to the next thing. So Boston fans could be like, hey, could we be giving up Jaylen Brown for the next 7 to 8 years of great basketball in order to acquire KD for 2 years and maybe he wants to get out of Boston? Who knows? There's a lot of gray area there. But if you're the Boston Celtics and if you're the Boston fans, I understand where there's this gray room between we want Kevin Durant, we want us to get that guy who's a superstar, a transcendent talent who can get us over the hump and get us to that next level. Because could you imagine that storyline if the Boston Celtics went up against the Golden State Warriors in next year's finals and KD led that team and that Boston Celtics team and they went head to head with the Golden State Warriors again? Imagine the headlines for that. But that's just my 2 cents on it if I was a Boston fan, which obviously I'm not. But let me get into my final verdict now. What should the Boston Celtics do? Should the Boston Celtics trade Jaylen Brown in order to acquire Kevin Durant? And the short answer is yes. At the end of the day, if you're going to be able to get a transcendent generational superstar, let's say it's even for 2 years. Let's just say I give you 2 years of Kevin Durant being happy in Boston before he wants out. You're telling me the Boston Celtics team as currently constructed right now could not be the betting odds-on favorite in the Eastern Conference next to the Milwaukee Bucks and could go and win the NBA Finals in these next 2 seasons with Kevin Durant on this team? You are damn sure they could. And look, I understand the heart and sympathy of what a Boston fan would feel like saying, hey, we've grown Jaylen Brown here. This is his team. We love him. And obviously we want to keep this core and this foundation together. We were 2 wins away from winning the NBA Finals. Ime Udoka helped get us over the top because Brad Stevens couldn't help us get there consistently time and time again. I understand where the emotional attachment comes in, but Jaylen Brown will never be Kevin Durant. That's just common knowledge, okay? And Jaylen Brown is a terrific player. He's a top 15, top 20 player in the game, okay? Jason Tatum, 2-time All-NBA, first-team All-NBA this past season, 3-time All-Star. Jaylen Brown was a reserve in 2021, I believe, and 1-time All-Star. That's all Jaylen Brown's got on his resume at the end of the day. And like I said, Jaylen Brown honestly outperformed Jason Tatum in a lot of ways this postseason when you look at it in its totality. Jaylen Brown proved a lot. The Boston Celtics proved a lot. Jason Tatum proved a lot. But there's a lot that remains to be seen, and there's this huge gray area. If you have the opportunity to go and get a transcendent guy to pair along with Jason Tatum, and these guys can play the 3-4, you're talking about a lineup with, you know, Robert Williams and Time Lord. You've got Malcolm Brogdon, who you just acquired this offseason. Then you pair him up with KD and Jason Tatum, and then whoever you want to throw in at the 2, maybe a guy like Derek White as well, too, if you don't have to give him up in the trade. You do it. If you're the Boston Celtics, like I said, the front office, you are in the business of winning games. And if Kevin Durant is going to help you win games, because he sure as hell will, you make that trade. The Brooklyn Nets, you have a distressed asset. It makes too much sense. Yeah, you've got Kevin Durant under contract for the next 4 years, but he doesn't want to be there. It clearly didn't work out with Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant. You might as well go in a different direction. Now, where would that leave the Brooklyn Nets if that trade was to go through, hypothetically speaking? The Brooklyn Nets would have a pretty solid roster, not a championship level roster, but they got a pretty solid roster. They just traded for Royce O'Neal from Utah, a very good 3-and-D guy, and he's a great defender. Obviously, you add another defender with Marcus Smart, the defensive player of the year. Then you get another defender coming in with a guy like Ben Simmons, so your defense is going to be locked down. You got Claxton down low as well, too, who's a solid rim protector as well. You've still got Kyrie Irving, who's clearly shown the ability to not be a number one, but Kyrie Irving's still a transcendent 50, 40, 90 guy and one of the most athletically skilled guards we've ever seen in NBA history. You've still got Seth Curry. You've definitely got a squad there in Brooklyn if you were to acquire that, and obviously you get a guy like Jaylen Brown too. But obviously we know that team is not going to be contending because you're losing the best player in that deal in Kevin Durant. Get the young commodities, get the draft picks, and I'm thinking something realistic is somewhere around Jaylen Brown and Derek White, or maybe, Jaylen Brown and Grant Williams in 3 first-round picks. I think that's something, and maybe a pick swap here and there for Kevin Durant. I think that's a very realistic and fair trade. This trade makes sense for both teams. The Boston Celtics are trying to win now. They're in that mentality of trying to win a championship while they have this core together and they're intact. And the Brooklyn Nets are clearly just headed in a different direction. This trade just makes too much sense for both teams. The Brooklyn Nets, you might as well tear it up. I'm not saying you got to go in a complete rebuild. Just be respectable. Get Jaylen Brown, get some valuable, picks and role players and some assets in return. In the Boston Celtics, pair Jason Tatum up with a guy like Kevin Durant, and you are going to be the betting odds-on favorite next to the Milwaukee Bucks to come out of the East next season. And you probably will come out of the Eastern Conference if you remain healthy. I believe that Kevin Durant is destined to go to the Boston Celtics. In a perfect world right now, this trade just makes too much sense. But Celtics fans and NBA fans, and especially Celtics fans, I know that this is a tricky situation, but please let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. Would you guys trade for Kevin Durant? And should the Boston Celtics trade Jaylen Brown for Kevin Durant? I absolutely 110% say yes. That's just my personal thoughts on it. But if you guys enjoyed today's video, make sure you guys drop me a thumbs up. It takes 1 second and it helps me in the channel out tremendously. And if you guys are new here, consider hitting that subscribe bell to stay tuned for more Jaguars and, of course, NBA content that I do here on YouTube. And if you guys could, make sure you all go follow me on my socials. I'm very active and I'm on there every single day. And especially on Twitter, I'm really still trying to keep growing that following. The link tree will be in the description down below. But thank y'all again for sticking around throughout the whole video. Brett James, aka BJ, I'm out, y'all. Peace.